Lovely. Well, welcome everyone. It's a new opportunity to be teaching webinars for me. And I had the wise idea that perhaps we'd use cameras, but I think just with the number of people, it will be easier if you won't need to keep your camera on, but we'll try and involve you as much as possible in some quiet ways. So, and the lovely music that brought us in, I was certainly able to kind of take a bit of a time out myself. So just a little bit about me. My background in my career is work in geriatric psychiatry, with a focus on working with people who are experiencing dementia-related behaviors. And I've always been very interested in the interpersonal communication, ways to minimize strained interactions that can occur between family members and people who are living with cognitive change, and professional caregivers who are supporting people as well. I really became interested in mindfulness when I attended a workshop by Dr. Dan Siegel, whose work on brain health you'll see a little bit, we'll just touch on today. And one of the things he did in the workshop was to lead a mindfulness practice, focusing on paying attention to the breath. And I was struck by the meditation. It was remarkably simple, but I'd never really paid much attention to my breath before. And I really noticed some calm and some spaciousness that arose from it, and then a very busy mind as well. And that was in roughly 2010, or maybe just before. And I started to explore mindfulness practice and its benefits to the brain and health in general. And I started a meditation practice regularly myself. And I really found it very beneficial as a parent, as a wife, as a daughter to a wonderful mother who at that point was dealing with a lot of anger and reactivity as part of her Alzheimer's disease journey. And I learned that I could, more often than not, really help her feel safe, well, and not always. Or I could either do that, or I could provoke a situation into reactivity in a moment if I brought the wrong energy into the apartment when I was visiting. And so, what was the ingredient that made the difference? Well, it was really being able to pause, to let go of my busy life and my agenda, and to join her in her experience of the world. It was about listening carefully with my heart, not my head, and confirming what I heard. So making sure that I'd heard clearly and listening for the feelings and needs that were going on for her in that moment. So once I was present and she really felt heard and joined, then we could usually do pretty much anything together. So what was the secret sauce? What was it? Oh, it was really mindfulness. It was about purposefully, and we'll talk more about this, but purposefully paying attention to the moment that I entered, without judging me or her, and bringing a lot of curiosity and kindness to both of us as we connected. So we'll talk more about that as we move along. When things went sideways, which they often did, it was usually because I arrived with too big an energy and a to-do list that was much more than she could manage. And she showed me that distress with her irritability or her fear. And then I learned to pause in that moment, to listen, and to actually be very kind to myself as well as her, because it was in that pausing that I was usually able to start over, and things worked out much better. So that's just sort of a little bit about how mindfulness has sort of been really important to me in my own personal journey, and we'll talk a bit about how it shows up in my work. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's my little arrow's working, but that's okay. So resilience. So starting over, as I sort of said, when things went awry, is a key part of resilience, which is a really vital trait to develop during the dementia care partnering journey. And I'm primarily speaking to family members who are walking alongside someone who is living with cognitive change. But a lot of what I'm going to say is equally applicable. So learning to get back on the horse when you've been thrown off is, which often happens in our day-to-day sort of being with this thing we call dementia or cognitive change. We need to be able to do it. We need to be able to get back on the horse when we've been thrown off. And so what do we mean by resilience? It's becoming a bit like the word mindfulness, overused and a bit underexplained. But I love this definition by Linda Graham, who says that resilience is the capacity to bend with the wind, to go with the flow, and to bounce back from adversity. So it's about flexibility. It's about acceptance and ease, sort of not fighting really as hard as we often do against what's real, and then bouncing back when things are a challenge. And to be honest, I mean, I will just actually go back for a moment to this slide. You know, if you happen to be someone who is, who's just listening in out of interest to this program and you haven't been a caregiver, you have had a real taste for the need for resilience, as we all have had in the last few months. COVID-19 is a huge lesson for all of us. We've all been dealing with uncertainty and difficulty from the fear of illness to illness itself, to just the fear of isolation, the experience of isolation, to financial challenge. And it's really important to question, how have you managed? Well, now imagine adding on the challenges of living with or supporting someone who's living with cognitive change. And so resilience, you've been resilient, because resilience is very much about how we approach situations that we didn't ask for or ever want. And COVID-19 is one, as is cognitive change. It's not one we sign up for or look forward to necessarily. And it's our ability to adapt and learn new skills, new ways of doing things, while honoring the emotions that are part of the experience. So it's not papering over or Pollyannaing, it's about holding the sadness and holding the joy. So we really don't need to touch much on this issue. I'm sure that if you're part of this webinar, you're familiar with the word dementia and what it means, but let's just take this opportunity to get onto the same page. So dementia is an umbrella term, right, for a set of symptoms that are caused by disorders affecting the brain. So the term dementia is it's a general term, and these are a group of symptoms that tend to come together. There are about 80 to 90 different forms of dementia, but the common ones are Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, mixed dementias, Lewy body, frontotemporal dementias, and then the reversible dementias, such as severe depression or medical issues that can present with cognitive change. And the reason I put this slide up there is a diagnosis of dementia really isn't a diagnosis. You want to know what is the cause of the challenges in the thinking. What's the underlying illness that is causing the challenge? Because each illness presents slightly differently. So dementia is much more than a memory disorder, as you probably know, but each illness looks slightly differently, and the illness can affect our ability to learn new things, our ability to plan and initiate activities and make judgments or decisions. It can affect our ability to express ourselves and to take in language. It can affect our ability to do multi-step tasks like dressing, driving, preparing food. And it can also affect our ability to appreciate the consequences of our behavior. So if you are someone living with those changes, or someone who's living with someone who is experiencing those changes, it can be very demanding. So some of the challenges that are described by dementia care partners or caregivers, and again, this applies almost equally well to the people who are living with the illness and also the people who are caring for them: overwhelm, feeling isolated, feeling tense, burnout, isolation with fears and challenges, a loss of a sense of control, exhaustion, difficulty dealing with changing behaviors, difficulty translating knowledge into action. So and we'll talk a bit about that, feeling sad and hopeless, lonely, or a loss of a sense of oneself. We can sometimes just be buried in the experiences that we're having. So what makes supporting a family member with dementia so challenging? As I've mentioned, some of the disease-related issues, the fact that it tends to be an illness that lasts a very long period of time. It's very unpredictable and constantly changing. The actual experiences and sort of interacting with someone whose perception of the world is different can be quite challenging in and of itself. And also the emotional issues that arise for the person who's living with dementia can be challenging. As a caregiver, my own preparation for this, my own social network, if I've had issues of anxiety and depression myself or other health issues, that really can sort of color the experience of dementia caregiving. And then the relational issues. So if I've had a long-standing, rather conflictual relationship with someone, and now they're developing cognitive change, and I'm the person who's their primary caregiver, that can add a whole dimension to it as well. And finally, the practical changes. So the sense of isolation, the demands on time, the financial and work-related challenges, particularly, and even parenting when we're talking about early onset dementia situations. So I'm just trying to sort of set the stage. So is the caregiver experience all about stress? Like, is it all a negative experience? Absolutely not. This kind of, experience is a real opportunity to learn about ourselves. It's an opportunity to learn about cognitive change, and it's an opportunity to learn new skills. So this picture is beautiful as Gerber Daisy, and it says, something will grow from all you are going through, and it will be you. So I'd like to invite you right now to try something with me. So just stay where you are, don't change a thing, just close your eyes and become aware of the sensations in your body wherever they are the most noticeable right now. And only do this for a few seconds. So I'll give you a few seconds. What do you notice in the body right now? And now open your eyes. I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint for a minute and come back to the screen and ask if anybody's willing to either type into the chat something they noticed that they weren't aware of, that you weren't aware of before I asked you to do this. Or if you are willing, and you want to unmute yourself and tell me something you experienced. The weight of my necklace. Yeah, so it's amazing. You walked through this whole day and probably didn't notice that the weight of the necklace around your neck. Shallow breathing and tight shoulders. Tense in the shoulders a bit, and the pinch of my headphones, right? Pain in my left foot. I wasn't aware of that. Tension in my neck. So tight jaw, right? So, and these are things you weren't necessarily aware of before you paused, right? So really, this was a moment of mindfulness. And I want to just ask, I'm just going to ask Lori, I'm seeing the Alzheimer's Society picture in the middle of my screen, but are people seeing me is that what they're seeing?
Yes, that is indeed what they're seeing.
Because I thought that would be a shame if we were, just looking at the circle and at least didn't have the human receiving of all of these wonderful opportunities that are of noticing. But that moment was a moment of mindfulness. That was a moment of mindfulness. It was a moment of settling in to the only real moment that we really have, which is this one, right? So where were you beforehand that you didn't notice the weight of your necklace or the sort of the tension in your shoulders or the pain in your left foot? You were here, but you weren't maybe really here. You were listening, you were focusing elsewhere. You may have been thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. But to experience our lives and really connect with what's really going on, we need to be aware of what's happening as much as possible. It's kind of like some raffles where you have to be present to win. That's really what life is like. We have to be present to win. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. And thank you for sharing those experiences. There we are. Okay. Okay. So this is a slide from the Cyril and Dorothy, Joel and Jill Reitman Center for Alzheimer's Support and Training at the Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto. And this is a group that has really been forwarding the needs of dementia caregivers for a number of years now. And they talk about the 4 key elements for successful caregiving. So the fact that we really need practical and professional support and resources. We need knowledge of the disease and treatment, and we need effective caregiving and problem-solving skills, and we need emotional well-being. And I would just say that the focus on mindfulness really has benefit in the emotional well-being department and in the effective caregiving and problem-solving skills. So although we're not necessarily focusing on problem-solving, mindfulness and meditation practice, okay, sorry, getting a little message. Mindfulness and meditation practice really do support the strengthening of our prefrontal cortex, which is the problem-solving area of the brain. So although we're not directly thinking about problem-solving when we meditate, we actually grow the parts of our brain that help us to do that. All right. So self-care is not selfish. It's essential. I'm going to say this again because this is the mantra that I want you to leave here with. Self-care is not selfish, it's essential. And I don't mean by self-care going to the spa, taking a holiday, although those are wonderful forms of self-care. I'm talking about moments of self-care that make up your day. So here's a beautiful, I love this, this picture by a wonderful Instagram artist at a piece of work, if you're interested in looking her up. And she says, protect your peace. You are so worth it. And so self-care is really essential when we are either living with cognitive change or when we're living with someone who has cognitive change. And that means finding moments in the day and finding ways to nourish ourselves. And they can be moments. They don't have to be long periods of time. But so keep this mantra in mind as we walk through the rest of the presentation. Equally, this is our other mantra. Place your own oxygen mask on before you help anyone who needs your assistance. So one of the things that happens for many people who are caring for somebody with cognitive change is they get lost. They get lost and start to put on the oxygen mask of the other person without resourcing themselves. And we really maintain that it's essential to keep resourcing yourself as you are walking alongside someone with cognitive change. And if you don't, then we see with physical illnesses arising, we see worsening of chronic conditions, we see also emotional conditions arising, anxiety, depression. And then what do we have? We have 2 patients instead of 1. So it's why they actually, this is the wisdom of the airline industry to say, put on your own oxygen mask first, because if you don't, you will soon burn out and then you won't be able to support the person. So self-care is essential. It's not selfish, and put on your own oxygen mask first. So what does that actually look like? And again, I'm just going to touch on this before we move into the mindfulness sort of part of our presentation. But this is the Healthy Mind Platter that Dan Siegel, who was the fellow who introduced me to mindfulness, created. And he says that if we balance each of these aspects of our lives, we really can nurture our brains. And so he talks about the importance of sleep and physical time, of exercise, of focus time. So connecting in with something that you're really interested in and that demands your attention, connecting time, socializing, playtime, downtime. So just relaxing and letting go, and then time in. And that's where meditation and mindfulness are really part of the Healthy Mind Platter. So yeah, when we quietly reflect internally and focus on sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts, we help to better integrate the brain. And that's where mindfulness comes in. All right, so have a look at this little spectrum. So mindlessness versus mindfulness. Do you realize that we are often, very often, mindless? And what do I mean by that? We are often on autopilot. If you think about how much of your day have you actually been aware of versus you were aware that you got things done, or you were aware that you got up this morning, but the time between getting up and now, it's kind of a blur. And that's because we tend to function on autopilot, and we couldn't function in the world if we didn't. But we often spend a lot of time lost in the future or lost in the past. So our body's in the present, but where's our mind? So is the mind spending a lot of time worrying about the future and what it's going to look like and how it's going to be and what if? Or is it spending a lot of time thinking about the past, what didn't go well, what I should have done better, how it could have been better, how I'm not doing a good job? We can get lost in our thoughts and our feelings. And if you want an example of autopilot, think about the last time you were planning to go and pick up something at a place you don't usually go, and perhaps you found yourself driving to a very familiar place without even registering. That's autopilot, and that's how we live a lot of our lives. So cultivating mindfulness is actually training the mind to develop greater awareness of the present moment. This figure that you see standing right in the middle, to come out of our heads. That's where we are when we're on autopilot. We are thinking about life rather than, and gets kind of swooped up in our automatic reactions to things. We're not actually present in life and noticing what's actually happening for us. So to be present in our life, we have to consciously, purposefully bring ourselves into this present moment, noticing what, like you did, your current physical sensations, your thoughts and feelings. And again, without judging ourselves, because as soon as we start judging ourselves, we're off in thinking land again. Being mindful actually helps us to step out of the fight, flight, and freeze response to stress, the sympathetic activation, the chronic sympathetic activation that can happen when we're all experiencing tension. It helps us to move into the rest and digest part of the autonomic nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And it slows us down so that we can make choices about how we want to respond, rather than being driven by the automatic reactions of life. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to listen to this poem. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper. And I remember again that life isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we're born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. And that's called Walk Slowly by Dana Falls, inviting you to open your eyes again. All right. I'm going to, we'll take a pause for questions after the next slide. So I'd like you to focus your attention on the right hand of this slide in front of you and look at the two people who are out for a walk together. Which one of these two people is really taking in the walk? And which one is lost in their head? Which one is mindless? Which one is on autopilot? Now, which one do you think is likely enjoying the experience more? So a study by Dan Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth from Harvard in 2010 explored moments of happiness using an app on a smartphone. And they found that 46% of the time, we are not attending to our immediate surroundings. And that when we're doing that, when we're lost in our thoughts, we're actually less happy. So a wandering mind isn't a happy mind, especially as we tend to wander where? Towards the negative aspects of our thinking. And why? Because our brains have a natural negativity bias. So that being said, if I would like to be able to be more present with my experiences and if that's actually going to benefit me in some way, what is mindfulness? So mindfulness is awareness. Okay, it's awareness that arises when we purposefully pay attention. So we're training our attention. When we train our attention to come into this present moment experience without judgment. So without judging how I'm doing or whether I'm doing it well enough, and with openness and curiosity. So I'm going to come into this present moment with a curiosity about what's going on and an openness to explore and a willingness to be with what is, which many of us don't want to do. We don't like it the way it is, and we want it to be different. And that's understandable. We're not asking you to like it, but we're asking you to be willing to be with what is. And that is mindfulness. Mindfulness strengthens the muscle of attention. So when we are working with mindfulness, we're actually strengthening attention. And attention is something that fades for all of us as we grow older. So it's an excellent practice for healthy aging as well. It helps us to move out of our heads so we can really be here. It helps us to be with unpleasant experiences just as they are, not trying to push them away because that actually causes us more pain. And it helps us to develop an interest and curiosity in what is really happening and to recognize the stories in our minds without getting lost in them or judging them as bad. So mindfulness is actually quite simple, but not easy. And I'm going to pause the slides here if I can. There we go. Excellent. And I will, I'm actually wondering if it's wise to open for questions. I think we could get lost. So maybe if you have a burning question, why don't you type it into the chat, and I'll check again. We will definitely have time for questions. I'm just thinking that maybe it might impede the flow and we could get off on some interesting tangents, but we might not get through our material. So hold on to the questions actually, or put them in the chat and we will get to them. But I would like to show you right now, I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you a short video that was made by Dan Harris. Dan Harris was an ABC commentator who actually hosted Good Morning America and had a panic attack on air. And he subsequently explored mindfulness as a way to deal with his anxiety and has become a teacher of mindfulness and actually someone who teaches and gets a lot of teachers to teach others about mindfulness. So he's made a video, a very short video, and I'd like to be able to share it with you now. Okay, so just see if I can find it. No. Okay, I'm just going to escape for a minute. And all right, here we are.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. but you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
Okay. Well, that was just a little way of sort of getting a sense of mindfulness and the idea that eventually it will perhaps be as mundane as brushing your teeth. Oh, I've gone too far back. Mundane as brushing your teeth or exercising. So that being said, how is mindfulness developed? Well, there are two really key strategies for becoming more aware in the present moment and using the attention to do that. The first are the formal mindfulness practices. So that's where mindfulness meditation comes in. It's the supercharger of awareness, and can be anywhere from a moment, from 5 minutes right up to 45 minutes or an hour. Some very trained meditators train and spend hours a day. Monks in Asia, or people who actually go on 3-month retreats, can spend days and days in meditation. But we don't have to. We just need to spend anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes a day to really garner the benefits. There are also in the moment practices, and we'll share one of those with you towards the end. Something like, when things go awry, what can I do? How can I pause? How can I do that in an organized way that will help me to connect in with mindfulness instead of connecting in with fear or upset? And then we have the informal mindfulness practices. And this is beautiful, because right now, especially with COVID, what do we spend a lot of time doing? Hand washing. Did you know that you could actually bring mindfulness to the act of hand washing? It's recommended that we spend 20 seconds washing our hands. And actually, if you spend time with the sensations of washing your hands, it can become a very interesting process. And it's one that you're doing mindfully. You're bringing your attention to the act of hand washing, the physical sensations, the thoughts that are arising, and the feelings. And it's just from being with. So we can mindfully do dishwashing, we can mindfully brush our teeth, and that means, what does it feel like? These individual moments, from anywhere from picking up the toothbrush in my hand, taking the toothpaste, the squeezing of the toothpaste, placing that toothpaste on the toothbrush, running it under the water. Each of those actions can be done mindfully. So people often say, I haven't got time for mindfulness. You really just need to use the time that you are doing other things and bring your awareness and your attention to them in a different way, as opposed to spending your showering time thinking about all the things you're going to do as the day progresses. So, I'm going to invite you actually now, to join me in a short practice. So I'm going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to sit with your feet firmly on the floor and closing your eyes if you feel comfortable to do that. Or you can simply lower the eyes into a receptive gaze, staring gently in front of you, not onto anything in particular. And noticing that in this moment, your feet are making contact with the floor. And noticing the sensations at the points of contact. Noticing your feet inside the shoes. What sensations are you aware of now that you weren't aware of moments ago? And noticing your bottom as it makes connection with the chair. What are the sensations that you become aware of? Noticing the sensations in your hands as they rest on your lap. So checking in with what other sensations are prominent in this moment. And becoming aware also of any thoughts that might be going through the mind right now. And any emotions that you're aware of. Not trying to change anything, simply becoming aware of what is present in this moment. And then inviting you now to shift your attention towards the experience and the sensations of breathing. Perhaps taking 2 to 3 slower, deeper breaths. And if you can, exaggerating slightly the out breath. So perhaps breathing 4 or 5 on the in, 5 or 6 on the out. And really feeling the sensations of breathing where you notice them most clearly, perhaps at the nostrils, the rising and falling of the chest, or the rising and falling of the belly. And if you're not sure, you can just place the hand on your belly and just notice the sensations of breathing as the belly rises and falls in contact with your hand. And as you sit, feeling the sensations of breathing, the attention will wander. That's what minds do. Minds wander, the attention wanders. And you're invited very kindly and gently, but clearly, to notice where the mind and attention has gone and invite the attention back to the focus of this practice, which is the sensations of breathing. And when the mind wanders away, recognizing it has gone and inviting it back is a moment of mindfulness in itself. Now inviting you to move your attention to the sensations of the whole body breathing. Be aware of as the whole body breathes in and breathes out. Becoming aware of your body posture. Becoming aware of your facial expressions. Just noticing. And then inviting you to turn the attention back to the fact that you're sitting on a chair right now. Reconnecting with the sensations of the bottom as it makes contact with the chair. And noticing the sensations of your hands in your lap. And noticing the sensations of your feet on the floor. And when you hear a bell, notice the rising and falling of the sound. And after the third bell, gently open your eyes and reconnect with the room around you. So inviting you to enter into the chat, anything you noticed in that practice, what that was like for you to spend that 3 minutes just experiencing the moment as it was. So relaxed and calm. Anybody else? Anything else that was calmness? Wandered a lot. Way to go. Yes, the mind is busy often. We call it monkey mind when the mind is wandering away from her and into something else. A slower heart rate was noted. Calmness and peacefulness. Interesting. And that is one of the aspects of mindfulness that is very interesting, which is that it is often does allow us some rest. It allows us to find some peacefulness. But also, that's not what it's about. It's actually not about emptying the mind. So that's one of the things that people often worry, that if they're having lots of thoughts, they're doing it wrong. And actually, no, that's what the mind does. And as you practice more, as you practice returning to the focus of attention in the concentration practice on the breath, over time, the mind does wander less, but it wanders for us all. And it doesn't matter how much you practice, that's just part of the experience. So someone noticed hearing the birds chirping, and then a variety of experiences like calm, happy, uncomfortable, twitchy. Someone knows that their thinking became slower, and that slowing down is actually a really important part of mindfulness practice, and especially when we are supporting somebody who has cognitive change. And we'll talk a bit about that as I share the content again. Okay. All right. So what are the benefits of mindfulness? And this is generally the case. And they talked about the scientists swooping in and noticing what running did for people. The study of mindfulness is growing exponentially. And what is understood is that it really assists with well-being, easier to savor the pleasures in life as they occur. It helps us to become fully engaged in whatever we're a part of in the day. And it does help us to grow resilience. It actually helps us to release what difficulties we've had and get back on the horse. It can physically can lower blood pressure. It can improve chronic pain experiences and is thought to improve immune functioning and reduce inflammation in the body to some degree. Psychologically, it is definitely shown to improve anxiety and depression. It reduces stress. It improves sleep. It improves concentration and focus, emotional regulation, and less rumination. But it is not the panacea, right? It is not a cure for every ill. And the way mindfulness is practiced, although it is derived from Buddhist practices, and the Buddha's practice of 2,500 years. It is not a religion in itself. Anybody it is a secular practice now. What is drawn from the Buddhist world is Buddhist psychology. So understanding some of the aspects of suffering and how we think about things and how that contributes to our pain. Mindfulness is not a state of bliss, as you saw people describing. It was kind of a restless experience at times. And it's not about reaching bliss. It's not about emptying the mind. It's not about mind control. It's not something to harass yourself about, that you didn't do it if you have an intention to try. It's not an assurance that you'll always be happy, well, safe, and stress-free. That is for sure. But it does help us to actually ride alongside all the experiences that life brings us. So how does mindfulness benefit the care partners of people with dementia? Well, it helps grow wholehearted, unrestricted cooperation with the unavoidable, which, as far as I can tell, is pretty much the experience of life. But it really, there is so much as a care partner that we cannot control, and we do not have we can't avoid. So mindfulness actually helps us grow that cooperation with life as it is, perhaps not as we wish it would be. In terms of benefits to the caregiver, some of the greatest challenges for caregiving are not actually the situations that we experience, believe it or not. It's more our response to them. We often create more discomfort and pain for ourselves. When we wish things would be different than they are, or we actually more than wish, we push away what is and don't want to see it. If we get angry for the situation, if we believe that someone's behavior is intentional or attention-seeking, if we're harsh and self-critical, if we don't deal with our sadness or grief, but instead become distracted by the conduct of others, the healthcare system, which, often with justification, but sometimes without benefit. So mindfulness practice really helps us to work with our stories, and it helps us to become aware of the stories that are trapping us. It helps us to unhitch from unhelpful thoughts. It really helps in the process of accepting things as they are. Not that we don't work to do what we can about them, but that we don't push them away or deny them. We become less reactive and more patient. We have that calming of the sympathetic nervous system and less tension. We connect more easily with moments of gratitude and joy, which are in every day when we actually have the space to look for them. And we experience more kindness and self-compassion, which I'm going to be talking about on August 5th. So mindfulness practices actually help us to connect with our partner rather than correct. That's one of the key phrases that we work with when we are supporting people to develop their communication skills. When we come in wanting to try and get someone to see things our way or the way we think they should be, rather than finding ways to connect around what we have in common, that creates a lot of tension. So the more we can be aware of what's going on right here and now, the more effectively we can actually connect with our care partner. One of the major things we learn from mindfulness practice is how to check in with ourselves, how to check in with our partner, and how to recognize early when things are moving in unhelpful directions. To be able to take a real pause and then take the next step in a measured, thoughtful way, rather than reacting in ways that we've always done, which actually makes things worse. So we can become way more empathic of our care partner's experiences and can see their behavior and ours as the result of unmet needs. And we can begin to explore what it is that I'm needing and feeling and what they're needing and feeling, and through that, find our place of connection. So mindfulness practice does help the quality of life for the person that we're caring for. Now, I'm just going to see if we have time to do a stop practice. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. So it's 2:52, and I would like to leave time for questions. So I think what I'll do is, for those of you who would like to join us again on August 5th, I'll make sure that I incorporate the stop practice, which is in the moment practice. When things are going off the rails, it's the practice I often go to help me pause, to take several breaths, to observe what's going on in my own body, my own experience, what's happening for the other person, and to decide how to proceed most wisely. And when we meet on August 5th, I'll walk us through that particular practice. So one of the other lessons that mindfulness really helps us with, it helps us to learn to hold the complexity of living with cognitive change or walking alongside someone with cognitive change. So it helps us to hold both the pain and the challenge and not paper it over, but to acknowledge it, give it space, and also the other side of things, which is, and I can do this, and I can experience pain, and I can do this. So we do a lot of work around the this is true and this is true, and they can be true at the same time. The mindfulness-based dementia care program, in Vancouver, we're the first people in Canada to be able to provide mindfulness-based dementia care. At the moment, it is through the St. Paul's Hospital Dementia Caregiver Resilience Program. And our program is extremely small, so we haven't been able to open it to the general public, but it's an 8-week course focusing on formal mindfulness meditation practice as well as mindful communication. Yeah, it's been a very interesting experience to learn and to share with others. So in summary, there are 4 reasons to practice mindfulness if you are supporting somebody who's living with dementia. You can, 1, to reduce your stress and to improve both your physical and your mental health. Secondly, to increase your sense of self-efficacy as a care partner, caregiver. So to increase your sense of confidence and your ability to tolerate the fact that things go off the rails and to get back on the horse. To improve the well-being for the person with dementia. And that's equally important. So our ability to slow ourselves down and to be aware of how we are being in the moment when we are with the person that we're supporting, it really improves the quality of life for both of us. And it decreases the need for behaviors in the person with dementia. So there's less need for them to express their frustration through their behavior because we are picking up their needs earlier on in the challenge. I would love to, if I can just get my fingers on it, read you one poem as we finish. And the poem is called The Clearing by Martha Postlethwaite. I'll just come off sharing to do this. So inviting you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. The Clearing. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. So reminding you that self-care, you can open your eyes at this point, self-care is not selfish, it is essential. Mindfulness practice is a key self-care skill and really opens the experience of care partnering so that we are more able to grow through it and less overwhelmed by it. So I will turn it over to Sarah and Lori.
Great. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me see if I can turn on my video so I can be present with everybody today as well. Wonderful. So thank you so much. That was great. Definitely to echo what everyone was saying, I felt very calm during your exercises and noticed that my street is actually really quite loud and I hadn't noticed how loud before. So thank you. For all of those who joined us today, we have posted in the chat box for you a list of some resources where you can follow up and receive some more information about mindfulness if you're interested. And as well, let's see, in that list of resources, I have quite a few links open right now. In that resources page, you'll find a link to the Presence Care Project, which is mindfulness-based dementia care, and Liz has provided some recommended books. And then there's also a contact information there. And Liz, I'll just share your email address again. In the resources page, you'll find my email address, so I can forward any information or any questions you have to Liz. But as well, Liz has shared that she's comfortable providing her email. So I'll just put that in the chat box for you. So you're also welcome to get in touch with Dr. Drance if you would like to follow up with any questions or to learn more about mindfulness-based dementia care. And just a reminder, on August 5th, we do have Dr. Drance joining us back again for self-compassion. So learning a little bit more about self-compassion. And Liz, maybe I'll pass it over to you in a minute to talk a little bit more about what that will entail. But I also just wanted to note that there is a link in the chat box to a survey. If you do have a few moments, we would love to hear from you, any feedback you have that we can always use to help improve our webinar program. So you can visit the chat box for that link. And then Liz, I'll just pass it back to you once again, just to talk a little bit more about that presentation on August 5th, if you can, please.
Yeah, so and one thing I just want to really apologize, the presentation took a little bit longer than I had intended. And so we didn't have time for questions, and really that is something we will make sure we have time for on August 5th. But so mindfulness meditation really helps us with kind of being clear on what's going on and being present. And then self-compassion really helps us when things go off the rails, which they do. And it's a way of really being kind to ourselves, which is the importance of that cannot be overestimated. Underestimated? Anyway, it's important. So please, really looking forward. It'll be a shorter period of presentation and more option for practice and for conversation at that time.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm seeing some questions coming in the chat box too, asking if the session was recorded. Yes.